Before this story pulls you under, make sure you're subscribed, hit like if you feel the tension, and leave a comment when the truth starts to sink in, because this case doesn't let go once it begins. The call came in just after dawn, when the Tombigbee River still looked calm enough to hide secrets. A fisherman had spotted something unnatural near the riverbank in Sumter County, Alabama. At first, he thought it was debris tangled in reeds. Then the water shifted, and a small hand broke the surface. By the time deputies arrived, blue lights cut through the morning fog, reflecting off water that had already decided to keep its silence. The body of a woman was pulled from the river first. Moments later, a second recovery, tiny, heartbreakingly still. A mother and her 3-year-old daughter found together in a place where answers tend to disappear downstream. News traveled fast. By noon, the riverbank was crowded with investigators, local officers, and silent onlookers who sensed this was not an accident. There were no signs of a boating incident, no overturned vehicle nearby, no struggle marks along the shore. Just 2 lives ended miles from where anyone expected them to be. Shardee McGill was identified, 32 years old. Her daughter, Janae, had just turned 3. They weren't from Alabama. They had been reported missing days earlier in Jackson, Mississippi, more than 100 miles away. That detail alone shifted the case from tragedy to something darker. Detectives began retracing the last known hours. Shardee left Jackson quietly. No goodbye messages, no packed bags that suggested a long trip. Surveillance cameras caught her car heading east late at night, Janae's car seat visible in the back. After that, the trail went cold. Friends described Shardee as exhausted, overwhelmed, but devoted to her daughter. No history of violence, no public breakdown, but investigators knew better than to trust surface impressions. In cases like this, the truth usually lives in what people don't say. As the autopsies were scheduled, the river was searched again and again. Divers looked for weapons, restraints, anything that could point to an outside attacker. Nothing surfaced. No fingerprints that didn't belong, no evidence of a struggle involving another person. Each negative result tightened the circle of suspicion. Then came the first unsettling discovery. Janae's shoes were missing. Not lost in the river, not found downstream, gone entirely. To seasoned investigators, that detail screamed intention. Someone had removed them before entering the water or after reaching the bank. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. By the end of the day, detectives gathered around a map marked with times, locations, and unanswered questions. A missing mother, a dead child, a river that erased more than it revealed. And just as the case seemed to stall, a forensic examiner made a quiet comment that froze the room. The autopsy reports arrived sealed, clinical, and unforgiving. Drowning, both mother and child. No blood force trauma, no defensive wounds, no drugs or alcohol at levels that explained what happened. On paper, it looked simple. In reality, it made everything worse. Detectives gathered in a small briefing room as the medical examiner explained the timeline. Janae had drowned first. Minutes later, Shardee followed. The order mattered. It stripped away comforting theories and replaced them with something almost unbearable to confront. The investigation pivoted instantly. If there was no third party, then every mile Shardee drove that night became evidence. Traffic cameras were pulled. Gas station footage was reviewed frame by frame. One clip showed Shardee standing beside her car at a rural Alabama station, Janae's car seat in the back seat. Shardee stared at her phone for a long time, typing, deleting, typing again. No message was ever sent. Detectives began interviewing people who knew her best. A close friend admitted Shardee had been under immense pressure, financial stress, a recent breakup, mounting isolation. But no one believed she could hurt her daughter. She lived for that little girl, one friend said, voice breaking. Whatever she was going through, Janae was her anchor. That belief made the evidence harder to accept. Investigators traced Shardee's route to a remote stretch near the Tombigbee River. The area was quiet, rarely patrolled, and perfect for someone who didn't want to be interrupted.
Tire marks near the bank matched her vehicle. Footprints suggested 2 sets, one adult, one small, leading towards the water. Only one set came back. Then came the discovery that shifted the emotional weight of the case. Janae's shoes were found in the trunk of the car. Clean, dry, placed side by side. It wasn't negligence, it wasn't panic, it was preparation.
The realization sent a chill through the task force. This wasn't an accident that spiraled out of control. It was a sequence of decisions, made slowly enough to allow doubt, yet carried out anyway. Each step toward the river was a chance to turn back. Psychological profilers were brought in. They spoke of distorted thinking, of mothers who believe death is protection, of despair so deep it convinces someone that the world is more dangerous than the water ahead. Still, none of it felt sufficient. Understanding didn't equal acceptance. As word spread, public reaction exploded. Some demanded justice, others refused to believe the conclusion. Online forums filled with alternate theories, kidnapping, trafficking, a cover-up. But investigators followed facts, not feelings. And the facts were tightening like a noose. Late one night, a detective reviewing Shardee's phone data uncovered something everyone had missed. Not a message, not a call, but a location search made hours before the drive began. Tombigbee River access points. Multiple searches, zoomed-in maps, saved pins. The room fell silent. This wasn't a moment of madness at the river's edge. The destination had been chosen long before the car ever started. But one final question remained unanswered. Why that night? Because buried deeper in Shardee's digital trail was one last clue, something scheduled for the very next morning that suggested she believed time had run out. Chapter 3. By sunrise, the investigation reached a grim, inexorable clarity. Shardee McGill's actions weren't random. Every detail, her route, the removed shoes, the meticulous placement of Janae in the car seat, pointed to premeditation. What had seemed like despair now revealed itself as deliberate planning. Detectives returned to the riverbank, retracing steps in the cold, biting wind. It was the kind of place where secrets waited patiently, hidden in the murky water and shadows. Forensic teams carefully photographed tire tracks, footprints, and debris. Even the smallest detail might answer the question tormenting the investigators: why? At the same time, cyber investigators pored over Shardee's phone, emails, and social media. They discovered long threads of anxiety, escalating over months, messages to friends that became increasingly desperate, journal notes typed late at night, online searches about postpartum depression, stress management, and legal obligations. One phrase repeated in different ways: "I can't protect her from this world." It was an insight into a mind consumed by fear, but fear twisted into something darker. The profiler explained it bluntly. She reached a point where she believed the only way to control the danger was to remove both herself and her daughter. It's rare, horrifying, but tragically consistent. Law enforcement pieced together the timeline of the final hours. Shardee had driven through the night, checking the back seat, rehearsing steps and scanning the deserted roads until she reached the river. Once there, Janae was removed from the car, her tiny shoes left behind as if to mark a moment that could never be undone. The child went into the water first. Shardee followed minutes later. The current carried them silently away, leaving only questions behind. By the time the coroner completed the final toxicology and pathology reports, the conclusion was unflinching. The deaths were ruled: Janae's death, homicide by drowning; Shardee's death, suicide by drowning. No external suspects, no intervention. A murder-suicide, a heartbreaking decision executed with meticulous care. Despite the closure, the ripple effects haunted the community. Friends and family grappled with guilt, asking themselves what they missed, what signs were ignored. Social media lit up with outrage, sorrow, and speculation. How could this happen became the question on everyone's lips. And yet, the truth, clinical, cold, and almost impossible to reconcile emotionally, was exactly what the investigators had uncovered: despair taken to its darkest extreme. Even now, weeks later, the river carries the memory. Residents speak in hushed tones about the mother and child who never returned. Investigators warn that such cases, while rare, are not unprecedented. Awareness, mental health resources, and early intervention are all emphasized. But for Shardee and Janae, the chance for help had passed. And then, a final twist came to light. Hidden among Shardee's personal effects was a notebook, untouched by anyone until weeks later. Inside were sketches and notes, planning for the future she would never live to see. There was one line underlined multiple times: "I hope the world remembers us as we were, not as this moment defines us." It was a haunting reminder that human tragedy is never just statistics. It's decisions, desperation, and lives intertwined in ways we may never fully understand. The case closed, the evidence archived, the river left to its quiet watch. But for those who followed the story, one truth lingered: a mother's love can be fierce, protective, and tragically misguided. And sometimes, the deepest darkness comes from the very hearts we trust the most.